My parents tried to give my inheritance to their favorite daughter. But my grandparents had a surprising twist in store. I grew up in a family where favoritism wasn't just a subtle thing, it was obvious. Glaring even. My sister, Olivia, was the golden child. She was the apple of my parents' eyes. The one they doted on endlessly. No matter how hard I worked or how much I achieved, it was Olivia who always stood in the spotlight. I told myself for years that it didn't bother me. But the truth was, it stung. It was like living in someone else's shadow. Never being quite good enough. Olivia was the perfect daughter in their eyes, smart, beautiful, and always at the center of attention. She had this effortless way of making everyone around her adore her. And my parents? They were no different. They praised her for every little thing, while I seemed to fade into the background. Always the responsible one, the quiet one. It wasn't that I didn't love my sister. We had moments of closeness growing up. Moments where we were just two kids playing together, laughing about things only we could understand. But as we got older, that bond frayed. Olivia learned how to manipulate situations to her advantage, and our parents were more than willing to enable her. It started with small things, letting her borrow my clothes without asking, giving her my spot in the car, things I could brush off. But over time, the differences in how we were treated became impossible to ignore. In high school, Olivia was the homecoming queen, the one everyone talked about. I was the one who worked 2 part-time jobs, juggling my studies to save for college because I knew our parents would prioritize Olivia's tuition over mine. Sure enough, when it came time for her to go to college, everything was paid for: tuition, books, housing, even a brand new car. When it was my turn, well, I had scholarships and loans. That was my reality, and I accepted it. I didn't have the luxury of being angry anymore. The favoritism extended beyond just material things. 2. Our parents defended Olivia at every turn, even when she made poor choices. When she dropped out of her first college because it wasn't a good fit, they encouraged her to take a break and find herself. When she got into credit card debt, they paid it off without a second thought. Meanwhile, I was the one they counted on to be responsible, to make sure I didn't ask for too much, didn't cause any trouble. As I worked my way through college, balancing jobs and classes, Olivia seemed to glide through life without a care in the world. She always had the latest fashion, went on expensive vacations, and seemed to be living the life I could only dream of. Yet, I told myself it was fine. I didn't need all those things. I was doing fine on my own. It wasn't until my grandfather passed away that things really reached a breaking point. Grandpa was a self-made man. He'd started with nothing and built a successful business. And while he wasn't wealthy by today's standards, he had done well for himself. More than that, he was a man of principles. Hard work, fairness, and family were everything to him. Of all my relatives, he was the one I felt closest to. He never played favorites, never made me feel like I was less important than Olivia. If anything, I think he saw through the dynamic between my parents and us. He would always ask me how I was doing, encourage me to keep working hard, and tell me how proud he was. When Grandpa died, it was devastating. Losing him felt like losing the one person who truly saw me for who I was. But amidst the grief, there was also the matter of his estate. I wasn't thinking about money or possessions, I was too caught up in mourning him. But then my parents called me over for a family discussion. I didn't think much of it at the time. I assumed it was about settling his affairs, maybe going over funeral arrangements. But when I arrived at my parents' house, the mood was different. They sat me down, their faces serious, but there was something else there too, like they were preparing for a confrontation. "We need to talk about Grandpa's will," my dad said, clearing his throat awkwardly. My mom sat beside him, her lips pressed tightly together. "Okay," I said slowly, trying to read the room. "What about it?" My father exchanged a glance with my mother before he continued. "He left you quite a bit. More than we expected. Actually, he left you his house and a significant amount of money from his savings." I was stunned. Grandpa's house? His savings? I hadn't expected that. I didn't expect anything, really. But before I could process what this meant, my mother chimed in. "But we think it would be better if that went to Olivia," she said, her tone clipped but firm. I blinked, unsure if I had heard her right. "What? Olivia's going through a tough time right now," my mom continued. "Her job isn't stable, and she's had a lot of expenses. We just think she could use the help more than you could." I stared at them, trying to wrap my head around what they were saying. "Grandpa left it to me," I said slowly. "Not Olivia. Why would I just give it to her?" My dad leaned forward, trying to sound reasonable. "We're thinking of the family here. You've always been more independent. You're doing fine. But Olivia, well, she needs more support right now." "More support?" I repeated, incredulous. "You've given her everything for her entire life. Now you want to take what Grandpa left me and give it to her too?" My mom sighed like I was being unreasonable. "It's not about taking anything from you. It's about doing what's best for Olivia." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Even after death, my parents were still trying to hand everything to Olivia on a silver platter. This wasn't just about money or a house. This was about respect. About acknowledging that I mattered too. That Grandpa saw me. That he wanted to leave something behind for me. I stood up, my voice shaking with anger. "No, I'm not giving her anything. Grandpa left it to me for a reason. And I'm going to honor that." My parents looked at me like I had just slapped them. My dad's face darkened. "We're just trying to do what's best for the family," he said, his voice tight. "Olivia is part of this family too. This isn't about family." I snapped. "This is about you playing favorites like you always have." "Well, not this time. I'm not backing down." I left their house that night, furious, hurt, and more determined than ever to stand up for myself. For the next few weeks, things between us were tense. My parents tried every tactic in the book: guilt, manipulation, even flat-out denial of what Grandpa's will said. They tried to make me feel like I was the selfish one. Like I was the one tearing the family apart. Olivia stayed quiet, but I knew she was behind it, playing the victim to get what she wanted as usual. Then came the final blow. I received a letter from a lawyer. My parents were officially challenging the will. They were actually trying to take me to court to have Grandpa's estate divided differently, so Olivia could get the house and the money. I couldn't believe it. They were willing to destroy everything over this. But I wasn't about to let them win. I hired my own lawyer and prepared for a fight. This wasn't just about an inheritance anymore. It was about standing up for myself. For once in my life, I had always let them push me around. Always let Olivia get away with everything. But not this time. The legal battle was ugly. My parents painted Olivia as the struggling daughter who needed support, while I was portrayed as the greedy, ungrateful one who didn't care about family. It hurt. It hurt more than I expected, knowing that they saw me that way. But as the weeks dragged on, I realized that this was my chance to break free, to stop letting them dictate how I lived my life. Finally, after months of back and forth, the court made its decision. Grandpa's will was upheld. Everything he had left to me, the house, the savings, was mine. My parents were furious. Olivia? She acted like she didn't care. But I knew better. She was used to getting everything she wanted. And this time, she couldn't. Afterward, my relationship with my parents was never the same. We barely spoke. Family gatherings were awkward, filled with tension and unspoken resentment. Olivia and I drifted further apart. But I was okay with that. For the first time, I felt like I had taken control of my own life. In the end, I sold Grandpa's house, used the money to pay off my debts, and saved the rest. I moved on with my life, knowing that I had stood my ground and fought for what was right. And while my family may never understand why I did what I did, I know that Grandpa would have been proud.